what the golf teach me? To respect every human being.
Ben Crenshaw has won the Masters.
It's a lesson more valuable than any club Carl Jackson ever carried, because it allowed him to choose the course of his life. Perhaps it's why the course of his life also chose him. The year was 1958. Carl was 11.
I'm walking up Gardner Street, and the caddy master from the Augusta National was looking for caddies, and he stopped and he asked me that I wanted to go, make some money that day, and I said yes.
Carl had been paving the way for this moment with every trip to a fence that separated poverty from privilege. He'd walk down Mount Auburn Street in Augusta's Sandhills to Weed Street, and at the dead end, hope came alive, thanks to a chain-linked window.
At the fence, we could go down there in the afternoons and just watch golfers playing in from 16 to 18 on the Augusta Country Club.
The grass was much greener on the other side.
It got my interest, and then I see other boys a little bit older than me. They're out there working and making money.
As hungry as he was to get an education, Carl had to help his mother put food on the table. There was nothing left over to buy a school uniform.
The pants was too short, and I was real skinny, and then I could hear the other kids in the background, and they were laughing real hard at me.
That was Carl's first day at A.R. Johnson, and his last. He dropped out, and his course of study became the golf course, and those who played it. Carl's teachers became the people his own children would later read about in the history books, like President Dwight Eisenhower, who was a member at Augusta National.
He just got my attention and said, "Son, why aren't you in school?"
Mr. Jack Stevens, a member who would later become like family to Carl, was listening.
He'll see to it that I get my GED.
And he did, but you could also say Carl has a master's degree.
You probably know the course better than anybody. Would you say that's fair?
Well, today I would say that's fair. You could think about a couple of the older guys, especially my mentor, Pappy Stokes. He helped build the golf course.
Carl was just 14 years old when he caddied his first Masters, and he's been back on the bag every year since, except for 2000 when colon cancer threw him off course.
That was the only time you missed the Masters.
Yes, since 1961.
You knew you'd be back, though.
I had faith that I would be back.
This year will be his 54th Masters, his 39th with Ben Crenshaw.
Here we are now, we're still together.
Carl was by Ben's side when he won his 2 green jackets, one in 1984 and the other in 1995. This will be Ben's last year as a competitor, and probably Carl's final one as well.
Like the golfer, you never say never, but if it's more than likely the last time.
The last time working as a caddy, but not the last time at Augusta National. Carl says that he is looking forward to coming back next Masters, to being a patron, to walking outside the ropes with his kids and with his grandkids. And Richard, even though this is the last time that he is working at the Masters, tonight is also a first for him and also a first for the city of Augusta.
It really is. As we speak right now in downtown Augusta, the mayor's Masters reception is underway. The great caddy Carl Jackson is the honoree. It's a great night for Augusta and for golf and for the Jackson family. It's the first time ever that honor is going to someone who is not a professional golfer. And
it means the world to him. I can tell you, Mr. Jackson is extremely humble. When I first contacted him about doing an interview with him, that I wanted to tell his story, he could not believe that I wanted to come all the way to Arkansas from Augusta, drive to Little Rock to talk with him. He just couldn't believe that. That really shows you how humble he is and how appreciative he is. So I can tell you, tonight means the world to him.
An Augusta native makes history as the first honoree who isn't a pro golfer at the mayor's Masters reception. This year, Carl Jackson will call it a career after more than 5 decades caddying at Augusta National. You could call him the last caddy standing. And after half a century at the Masters, imagine how much he's seen and experienced. Carl Jackson is a walking history book, and News 12's Meredith Anderson takes you through a few chapters.
It began at a dead end.
We've come a long way, baby.
at a fence guarding a line between poverty and privilege,
We've come a long way.
black and white. More than 50 years later, that fence at the end of Weed Street is still there. It hasn't really changed, but everything else is different.
You know, I remember the time in Augusta, early 60s, I got a police escort, but we were not going to the Mayor's Master's reception.
This year, Carl Jackson is the honoree. Jackson grew up in the Sand Hills, a poor community bordered by wealth. On one side, the mansions of Walton Way, the other, the Augusta Country Club, marked by that fence. Instead of keeping the 11-year-old out, that fence invited him to come in and work as a caddy. But then he found himself inside the gates of a much more exclusive fence.
It was family, yeah. And inside that fence, it was family.
The year was 1958. Augusta was still segregated.
You know, the first caddies were slaves.
But at Augusta National, Jackson says caddies were more like advisors.
Nothing racist was tolerated.
Jackson was only 14 when he caddied his first Masters. Back then, Augusta National required golfers to use local caddies, meaning local caddies got to share in the winnings. In 1970, Ernest Nipper, one of the best local caddies, got his share of something else.
Gary Player was getting troubles from what's going on with apartheid back in South Africa, and the NAACP was picketing outside on Washington Road, and they was getting death threats. And Nipper got scared or whatever and quit.
Jackson wasn't scared to take his place.
The NAACP is not going to pay my bills or whatever, you know, so it was a yes.
5 years later, Lee Elder became the first African American to compete for a green jacket. And Jackson was there when he teed off, but he never saw the drive. He wanted to watch the other people watching.
I just wanted to look some people in the face. Your expressions just tell them what's in your heart, in your mind. Living through the days of the death of the Kennedys and King, you're looking for something, and you're looking for hope. And I saw hope.
Inside that famous fence, he says there was always hope.
Carl is fixing to play.
It just wasn't always publicized.
You would think I threw a brick in the chicken house, you know, and everybody running everywhere. And
Carl Jackson had a crowd of employees watching him the day he became the first African American to play as the guest of a member, Mr. Jack Stevens.
They just yelled like I was Tiger Woods, so in hindsight, like, you know, yeah, you know, and it was done. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure.
He also felt a lot of pressure the first time he met Ben Crenshaw.
Because this guy can hit the ball where he's looking with skill.
Jackson knew he had to step up his game.
At the end, he had to be the one to say, I want to do it again with Carl.
And he did, 38 more times, even after the club dropped its local caddy rule.
He went against the system.
The very next year, Ben won his first green jacket. The next one came 11 years later.
Ben Crenshaw has won the Masters.
An emotional win, seen all over the world. Once again, those watching saw hope.
That's the way America should be. The black man taking care of the white man, and the white man taking care of the black man. Love your neighbor. He can crack you up with things he says.
His house might be in Little Rock, but it is easy to see part of Carl Jackson's heart will always live in Augusta.
He's getting ready to hit a good shot, too.
This will be his 54th Masters as a caddy, a record that likely will never be broken.
It's been fun.
It's also his 39th time on the bag for Ben Crenshaw, who won 2 green jackets with Carl by his side.
That's a tough little guy.
Carl was also by Ben's side in 2008 for another honor.
This one here is when Ben was the honoree at the Mayor's Master's reception, and we was getting ready for the motorcade.
Tonight, Carl will have his own motorcade through his own hometown.
Look handsome for the girls. I do the best I can.
We shared even more laughs at his kitchen table. But he admits he'll have to fight back tears, the good kind, when the spotlight is on him tonight.
Tears were just flowing.
Carl's breaking yet another record as the first non-golfer to be honored at the Mayor's Masters reception. And the timing is especially meaningful. This is Carl's final Masters as a caddy.
It's kind of like what it's going to look like, me saying goodbye this year. It's tip of the hat.
Now, as you can imagine, after more than 5 decades at the Masters, Mr. Jackson has quite a few stories to tell. And tonight, Meredith shares them with you. Everything from how a fence in Augusta Sandhills introduced him to golf, how a U.S. president helped him finish school, and how he saw Ben winning the Masters in his dreams both times he got a green jacket. So make sure you tune in tonight at 5, 6, and 11 for stories you'll see only on News 12.